Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're preparing for the UBC real estate exam, you're in the right place. In today's video, we're diving into Chapter 2 of the Real Estate Services Act, which covers everything from licensing requirements to the key roles and responsibilities of real estate professionals in British Columbia. Whether you're just starting your studies or you're looking to brush up on some key concepts, these practice questions will help you get a better understanding of what to expect on the exam. So grab a pen and paper and let's get started. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 1. In addition to carrying out the functions of a trading services representative, a validly licensed representative is entitled to A. Carry out trading services for an unlicensed real estate brokerage. B. Be the managing broker of their own proprietorship. C. Carry out trading services for close personal friends and business associates, although not employed by a brokerage. D. Do none of the above. The correct answer is D. Do none of the above. Licensed representatives must work under a licensed brokerage and cannot operate independently, manage a brokerage, or provide services through an unlicensed brokerage. Question 2. Alan recently assisted Peter in the sale of Peter's house. What are the legal consequences of his doing so? A. Unless he is licensed, Alan has breached the Real Estate Services Act. B. If Alan is unlicensed but performed the service without receiving or expecting any money or reward, he has done nothing wrong. C. As long as Alan was not involved in the writing of the contract of purchase and sale, he may act for Peter and receive money for it. D. If Alan is unlicensed but he is Peter's brother, Peter can pay him for the work and no breach has occurred. The correct answer is A. Unless he is licensed, Alan has breached the Real Estate Services Act. Under the Real Estate Services Act, anyone assisting with the sale of real estate, regardless of compensation or personal relationships, must be licensed. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 3. Once a licensee has obtained a signed acceptance from Alan of an offer to sell real estate owned by Bob and Carol jointly, the Real Estate Services Act requires the delivery of a copy of the agreement to A. Alan and Bob. B. Alan, Bob, and Carol. C. Bob, Carol. The correct answer is B. Alan, Bob, and Carol. Explanation. The Real Estate Services Act requires a licensee to deliver a copy of the signed agreement to all parties involved, the buyer, Alan, and both joint owners, Bob and Carol. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 4. According to the Real Estate Services Act and Real Estate Services Regulation, which of the following statements is true? A. An individual may commence trading in real estate immediately after receiving proof of passing the real estate licensing exam. B. All staff employed by a real estate brokerage must be registered with the British Columbia Financial Services Authority. C. An individual may be registered independently as a real estate representative without being employed by a registered real estate brokerage. D. A real estate representative is employed by their brokerage to trade in real estate in the brokerage's name on behalf of the brokerage's clients. The correct answer is D. A real estate representative is employed by their brokerage to trade in real estate in the brokerage's name on behalf of the brokerage's clients. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, representatives must be employed by a registered brokerage and can only trade in real estate under the brokerage's name, serving the brokerage's clients. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 5. A real estate broker has listed a property for sale at a listing price of $100,000. The commission is agreed to be based on the difference between the listed price and the actual sale price. The agreement is A. Contrary to the Real Estate Services rules. B. Lawful if the agreement is reduced to writing and signed by both parties. C. Specifically provided for as an acceptable commission arrangement in the Real Estate Services rules. D. Lawful if the buyer agrees. The correct answer is A. Contrary to the Real Estate Services rules. Explanation. Commission agreements based on the difference between the listed price and sale price create a conflict of interest and are prohibited under the Real Estate Services rules to ensure fair dealings and protect clients. Question 6. Which statute requires that a brokerage keep at least one trust account in a savings institution in British Columbia? A. The Real Estate Services Act. B. The British Columbia Property Managers Act. C. The Bonding Act. D. The Bank Act. The correct answer is A. The Real Estate Services Act. Explanation. The Real Estate Services Act mandates that brokerages maintain at least one trust account in a BC savings institution to safeguard client funds and ensure proper handling of deposits. Question 7. Which of the following is not a real estate service under the Real Estate Services Act? A. Constructing a commercial office building in Prince George for an owner who lives in British Columbia. B. Collecting rents from tenants in a residential building in Burnaby for an owner who lives in Singapore. C. Selling a Penticton property for an owner who lives in Victoria. D. Assisting in the sale of a condominium unit located in Vancouver but owned by a person who lives in Calgary. The correct answer is A. Constructing a commercial office building in Prince George for an owner who lives in British Columbia. Short explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, real estate services include activities like trading real estate, collecting rents, and managing properties. Construction services are not classified as real estate services under the Act. Question 8. Celeste's brokerage facilitates the sale of Salin's home. How long must the brokerage retain records of this transaction? 1 year, 7 years, 10 years? D. The brokerage must retain records of this transaction indefinitely. The correct answer is B. 7 years. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, brokerages are required to retain records of real estate transactions for a minimum of 7 years to comply with regulatory and legal requirements. Question 9. Which of the following is not one of the powers and duties of the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA? A. To conduct investigations relating to licensees. B. To issue and renew licenses. C. To ensure compliance with the requirements of the Real Estate Services Act. D. To enforce the Code of Ethics and Standards of Business Practice. The correct answer is D. To enforce the Code of Ethics and Standards of Business Practice. Explanation. The BCFSA is responsible for conducting investigations, issuing and renewing licenses, and ensuring compliance with the Real Estate Services Act. However, enforcing the Code of Ethics and Standards of Business Practice falls under the responsibility of the Real Estate Council of British Columbia, not the BCFSA. Chapter 2. BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 10. Which of the following is the British Columbia Financial Services Authority not explicitly empowered to investigate under the Real Estate Services Act, RESA? A. Wrongful taking or deceptive dealing. B. Breaches of the Realtor Code. C. Breaches of RESA. D. Incompetence as a licensee. The correct answer is B. Breaches of the Realtor Code. Explanation. The BCFSA is empowered to investigate breaches of the Real Estate Services Act, RESA, including wrongful dealings, breaches of RESA, and incompetence. However, the enforcement of the Realtor Code is the responsibility of the Real Estate Council of British Columbia, not the BCFSA. Question 11. A person appointed by a brokerage to represent it for all purposes under the Real Estate Services Act is referred to as A. A brokerage, B. An associate broker, C. A managing broker, D. A director. The correct answer is C. A managing broker. Explanation. A managing broker is appointed by a brokerage to represent it for all purposes under the Real Estate Services Act and is responsible for overseeing the brokerage's activities. Question 12. A real estate service under the Real Estate Services Act includes A. Finding a party to acquire real estate. B. Collecting rents or security deposits for the use of real estate. C. Advising on the appropriate price for real estate. D. All of the above. The correct answer is D. All of the above. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a real estate service includes activities like finding a party to acquire real estate, collecting rents or security deposits, and advising on pricing, as all are part of real estate transactions or property management services. Question 13. Which of the following statements about trust accounts under the Real Estate Services Act is false? A. A brokerage must have a trust account for each client. B. All client funds must be placed in a trust account as soon as they are received by the brokerage. C. Money paid by mistake into trust may be withdrawn from the trust account. D. Money paid for expenses incurred on behalf of a client and according to the client's instructions may be withdrawn from the trust account. The correct answer is A. A brokerage must have a trust account for each client. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a brokerage is required to have a single trust account for client funds, not a separate trust account for each individual client. The other statements are true, as funds must be deposited promptly, and money may be withdrawn for legitimate expenses or if paid by mistake. Question 14. To qualify for a managing broker's license, a person must meet which of the following requirements? Have at least 5 years' experience as a representative in British Columbia. B. Be a Canadian citizen. C. Be at least 19 years of age. D. Have obtained a bachelor's degree. The correct answer is C. Be at least 19 years of age. Explanation. To qualify for a managing broker's license under the Real Estate Services Act, a person must be at least 19 years old, in addition to meeting other specific requirements such as experience and training. However, Canadian citizenship and a bachelor's degree are not required. Question 15. The relationship between a brokerage and its related licensees is recognized and reinforced by certain provisions of the Real Estate Services Act, RESA. According to RESA, A. When a licensee advertises real estate on behalf of a client, the brokerage's name must be displayed in a prominent way. B. A licensee is entitled to advertise real estate on behalf of a client without the name of the listing brokerage appearing in the advertisement, providing the licensee's name is displayed in a prominent way. C. When a property is listed by the seller's brokerage and the buyer is represented by a different brokerage, both the seller's agent and the buyer's agent are paid their commission directly from the seller's brokerage. D. Real estate brokerages that charge only desk fees and pay 100% of the commission to their representatives are not responsible for the actions of the representatives. The correct answer is A. When a licensee advertises real estate on behalf of a client, the brokerage's name must be displayed in a prominent way. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, RESA, when a licensee advertises real estate, the brokerage's name must be clearly displayed. This ensures that the relationship between the licensee and the brokerage is transparent. The other options are incorrect, as they don't align with RESA provisions. Question 16. To qualify for a managing broker's license in British Columbia, a person must meet which of the following requirements? A. Submit personal financial statements for each licensee they intend to hire. B. Have provided real estate services within British Columbia or an equivalent jurisdiction for 2 out of the 5 years preceding the application. C. Have 3 years licensed experience in British Columbia. D. Be at least 29 years of age. The correct answer is B. Have provided real estate services within British Columbia or an equivalent jurisdiction for 2 out of the 5 years preceding the application. Explanation. To qualify for a managing broker's license in British Columbia, a person must have at least 2 years of experience providing real estate services within BC or another equivalent jurisdiction within the last 5 years. Other requirements like age and financial statements are not specified. Question 17. Which one of the following is not a course of action that the British Columbia Financial Services Authority can take following a disciplinary hearing? A. Reprimand the licensee. B. Order the cancellation of the licensee's license. C. Suspend the licensee from participation in the multiple listing service. D. Order the licensee to enroll in and complete a course of studies or training. The correct answer is C. Suspend the licensee from participation in the multiple listing service. Explanation. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, has the authority to reprimand, cancel, or suspend a licensee's license and order them to complete further training. However, it does not have the power to suspend a licensee from participating in the Multiple Listing Service, MLS. Suspension from MLS is typically handled by other real estate organizations or boards. Question 18. Which of the following is not a requirement of the Real Estate Development Marketing Act to protect the public? A. Developers must meet any preliminary requirements or approvals applicable to the type of property being marketed. B. Developers must assure the buyer's title upon purchase. C. Developers must prepare and file a disclosure statement in the form required. D. Developers must consult with members of the public over any proposed developments. The correct answer is D. Developers must consult with members of the public over any proposed developments. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, developers must meet certain requirements, such as obtaining necessary approvals, preparing disclosure statements, and assuring buyers' titles. However, there is no requirement to consult with the public over proposed developments. making option D incorrect. Chapter 2 BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 19. Under the Real Estate Services Act, where a licensee desires to buy real property or an interest in it for themselves or for a company of which the licensee is a shareholder, director, or officer, or for a partnership of which the licensee is a partner, which of the following must the licensee disclose in writing to the seller prior to the agreement? A. That they are a licensee acquiring the real estate for themselves or for the corporation or partnership. B. The amount of remuneration the licensee expects to receive based on the transaction. C. The name of the person to whom the disclosure is made. D. A licensee is required to disclose all of the above. The correct answer is A. That they are a licensee acquiring the real estate for themselves or for the corporation or partnership. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a licensee must disclose in writing to the seller that they are acquiring the property for themselves or for a corporation or partnership they are involved in. The disclosure does not require details about remuneration or the specific recipient of the disclosure. Question 20. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority does not have the authority to A. Cancel a licensee's license. B. Use funds from administrative penalties for non-educational purposes. C. Order unlicensed individuals to pay a monetary penalty for providing real estate services without a license. D. Apply to court to appoint a receiver over the property of a licensee. The correct answer is B. Use funds from administrative penalties for non-educational purposes. Explanation. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, has the authority to cancel licenses, impose monetary penalties on unlicensed individuals, and apply to court for a receiver in certain cases. However, it cannot use funds from administrative penalties for non-educational purposes. These funds are typically directed towards education or other specific uses outlined by the governing regulations. Chapter 2 BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 21. Where a licensee intends to purchase property, which of the following details must they disclose to the seller? A. The fact that they hold a real estate license. B. Any details that have been arranged for the resale of the property. C. The fact that they will be sharing in the commission on the sale. D. All of the above information must be disclosed. The correct answer is the fact that they hold a real estate license. Explanation. When a licensee intends to purchase property, they must disclose to the seller that they hold a real estate license. Disclosure of details like commission sharing or resale arrangements is not required by law unless specifically relevant to the transaction. Chapter 2 BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 22. Which one of the following is not a qualification for a trading services representative's license in British Columbia? A. Must have a minimum of 3 references from currently licensed managing or associate brokers. B. Must have attained the age of 19 years. C. Must be of good reputation. D. Must have met the educational and experience requirements established by the Real Estate Services Rules. The correct answer is A. Must have a minimum of 3 references from currently licensed managing or associate brokers. Explanation. To qualify for a trading services representative's license in British Columbia, the individual must meet specific requirements such as being at least 19 years old, having a good reputation, and meeting educational and experience requirements. However, there is no requirement to provide 3 references from currently licensed managing or associate brokers. Chapter 2 BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 23. To qualify for a managing broker's license in British Columbia, a person must meet which of the following requirements? A. Submit personal financial statements for each licensee they intend to hire. B. Have provided real estate services within British Columbia or an equivalent jurisdiction for 2 out of the 5 years preceding the application. C. Have 3 years licensed experience in British Columbia. D. All of the above. The correct answer is B. Have provided real estate services within British Columbia or an equivalent jurisdiction for 2 out of the 5 years preceding the application. Explanation. To qualify for a managing broker's license in British Columbia, a person must have provided real estate services within BC or an equivalent jurisdiction for at least 2 out of the 5 years preceding the application. The other options are not requirements for obtaining a managing broker's license. Chapter 2 BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 24. A developer is selling a development unit of subdivided land situated in British Columbia, and the developer has obtained a written statement from the purchaser acknowledging that the buyer has read the appropriate disclosure statement. If the purchase agreement is then entered into, the buyer, A, may serve notice to rescind the contract no later than 3 days from the date of the contract. B, may serve notice to rescind the contract no later than 7 days from the date of the contract. C, may serve notice to rescind the contract no later than 1 year from the date of the contract. D, may not rescind the contract. The correct answer is B, may serve notice to rescind the contract no later than 7 days from the date of the contract. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Development Marketing Act in British Columbia, a buyer has the right to rescind the contract within 7 days from the date the purchase agreement is entered into, provided they have acknowledged reading the required disclosure statement. This gives the buyer a cooling-off period to reconsider the purchase. Question 25. Kenneth, a licensed managing broker, has been sued by a buyer who relied on the advice of a representative employed by Kenneth. Evidence in the case indicated that Kenneth's representative was grossly incompetent and that Kenneth had failed to carry out his supervisory responsibilities as the managing broker. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, is instituting a formal disciplinary hearing to investigate the situation, and both Kenneth and the representative have received the notice of hearing. Kenneth does not think that BCFSA can discipline him and is angry that he is being held responsible for his representative's conduct. Which of the following statements is false? A, BCFSA has the authority to subject Kenneth to a disciplinary hearing for the action of his representative under the powers granted to BCFSA by the Real Estate Services Act. The representative cannot be disciplined jointly with Kenneth. Only Kenneth will bear responsibility for a breach of the Real Estate Services Act by his representative. C, one of the disciplinary options available to BCFSA in this case is to suspend Kenneth's license. D, if BCFSA imposes a discipline order on Kenneth, the Real Estate Services Act requires that BCFSA publish this order on its website and provide copies to any person upon request. The correct answer is the representative cannot be disciplined jointly with Kenneth. Only Kenneth will bear responsibility for a breach of the Real Estate Services Act by his representative. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a managing broker like Kenneth has responsibility for supervising the actions of their representatives. Therefore, both Kenneth and the representative can be disciplined separately for their conduct. BCFSA can take disciplinary action against both parties, and Kenneth can be held responsible for failing in his supervisory duties. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 26. A trading services licensee who is not licensed to provide property management services can A, collect rent from tenants, B, supervise contractors hired by the owner, C, negotiate a lease document, D, negotiate contractors on the owner's behalf other than the lease. The correct answer is C, negotiate a lease document. Explanation. A trading services licensee who is not licensed to provide property management services can negotiate a lease document because this involves the sale or lease of real estate, which is within their scope of trading services. However, they cannot engage in other property management activities like collecting rent, supervising contractors, or negotiating contractors on the owner's behalf without the proper property management license. Question 27. Which of the following is not a power or duty of the BCFSA? A, receiving licensing applications relating to real estate services. B, carrying out investigations and disciplinary functions in relation to licensees. C, making orders against unlicensed persons who provide real estate services without a license. D, lobbying the provincial government to protect the interests of real estate professionals. The correct answer is D, lobbying the provincial government to protect the interests of real estate professionals. Explanation. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, is responsible for receiving licensing applications, conducting investigations, and taking disciplinary actions against licensees. However, it does not engage in lobbying activities or advocate for the interests of real estate professionals. Its primary focus is regulatory and ensuring compliance with the Real Estate Services Act. Question 28. When a real estate licensee manages rental real estate owned by themselves, the licensee, A, is exempt from the application of the Real Estate Services Act, RESA, if they provide rental property management services under the name of their related brokerage. B, is always subject to RESA and the associated real estate services rules. C, should include the name of their related brokerage in any advertisements. D, must disclose to potential tenants that although they are licensed under RESA, they are not acting as a licensee in this case and are not regulated under RESA in relation to the rental real estate. The correct answer is D, must disclose to potential tenants that although they are licensed under RESA, they are not acting as a licensee in this case and are not regulated under RESA in relation to the rental real estate. Explanation. When a real estate licensee manages rental property owned by themselves, they must disclose that although they are licensed, they are not acting as a licensee in relation to this particular rental real estate. This disclosure is important because they are not providing real estate services under the scope of their license in this case, and thus are not regulated under RESA for this specific activity. Question 29. Which of the following is required in order for a trading services representative to maintain their license? A, the representative must be employed by an active brokerage at all times. B, the representative must be licensed as a personal real estate corporation. C, each year, the representative must file a certificate signed by a chartered professional accountant, certifying that the representative's books and records required by the Real Estate Services Act have been maintained. D, the representative must file at least one real estate transaction with the British Columbia Financial Services Authority each year. The correct answer is A, the representative must be employed by an active brokerage at all times. Explanation. To maintain their license, a trading services representative must always be employed by an active licensed brokerage. This ensures that the representative is working within the regulatory framework of the Real Estate Services Act, RESA, and is compliant with the requirements for practicing real estate in British Columbia. Question 30. Under the Real Estate Services Regulation, certain categories of persons are exempted from the licensing requirements contained in the Real Estate Services Act. Which of the following is not covered by an exemption? A, a business executive selling a neighbor's house for a flat fee. B, an individual providing a property inspection. C, accountants in relation to the purchase and sale of a business. D, a full-time salaried employee of Mega Land Company selling houses in a 3,000 house tract developed by Mega Land Company. The correct answer is D, a full-time salaried employee of Mega Land Company selling houses in a 3,000 house tract developed by Mega Land Company. Explanation. The Real Estate Services Act does not exempt full-time salaried employees who are involved in selling real estate, such as homes in a development, from licensing requirements. Employees working directly with real estate transactions must typically be licensed. However, individuals providing property inspections, accountants dealing with business sales, or business executives selling their own or others' property for a flat fee may have specific exemptions. Question 31. A developer of land not located in a municipality filed the necessary disclosure statement with the British Columbia Financial Services Authority with respect to his 20-lot subdivision. After foreclosure proceedings, the developer's bank became the owner of the subdivision. The bank wishes to sell the lots on an individual basis. Which one of the following statements is true? A, because the bank is selling more than 5 lots, it should file a disclosure statement with the British Columbia Financial Services Authority. B, a further disclosure statement is not necessary. C, the disclosure statement filed by the developer will satisfactorily protect people who purchase lots from the bank. D, because there has been a foreclosure, the bank is obligated to file a prospectus rather than a disclosure statement. The correct answer is A, because the bank is selling more than 5 lots, it should file a disclosure statement with the British Columbia Financial Services Authority. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, the sale of 5 or more lots by a party that is not the original developer requires the filing of a new disclosure statement. Since the bank now owns the subdivision and intends to sell more than 5 lots, it must file a new disclosure statement with the BC Financial Services Authority to comply with the regulatory requirements. Question 32. The Real Estate Services Act does not A. Set out sales procedures that must be followed by all licensees in order to keep their licenses. B. Empower the Superintendent of Real Estate to carry out key functions with respect to real estate licensing. C. Provide for subdivision regulation by requiring all developers to supply a disclosure statement. C. Require that all representatives and brokerages be licensed. The correct answer is A. Set out sales procedures that must be followed by all licensees in order to keep their licenses. Explanation. The Real Estate Services Act, RESA, outlines the licensing requirements, regulatory framework, and powers for real estate licensing in British Columbia, but it does not specify sales procedures for licensees to maintain their licenses. Instead, it focuses on the roles, responsibilities, and regulatory compliance required for real estate services. Question 33. A brokerage must maintain at least one account in a bank, trust company, or credit union designated as a trust account, into which the brokerage must put upon receipt all monies received for or on behalf of a client. The Real Estate Services Act only permits the brokerage to withdraw money from such an account under certain circumstances. Which one of the following is not one of them? A. Money paid to or in accordance with the instructions of the principal to whose credit the money was deposited. B. Money intended as remuneration for a licensee and that has been earned in accordance with the rules. C. Money paid into the trust account by mistake. D. Money required for payment of a brokerage's business expenses. The correct answer is D. Money required for payment of a brokerage's business expenses. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a brokerage is only allowed to withdraw money from a trust account for specific purposes, such as paying amounts according to a client's instructions, earned commission, or correcting mistaken deposits. However, business expenses of the brokerage cannot be paid from the trust account, as it is strictly for client-related funds. Chapter 2. BC Real Estate Exam Prep, Question 34. Chadwick is the listing licensee for a house. According to the Real Estate Services rules, Chadwick does not need to provide his client, the seller, with a disclosure of interest in trade, buying or selling form if the party making the offer to purchase the house is A. A corporation in which Chadwick holds 20% of the shares, B. Chadwick's wife, C. Chadwick himself, D. Chadwick's friend and tennis partner. The correct answer is D. Chadwick's friend and tennis partner. Explanation. According to the Real Estate Services rules, the disclosure of interest in trade form is required when a licensee is involved in a transaction personally or through a close relationship, such as a spouse or a corporation they own a significant stake in. However, if the buyer is a friend or someone without a close personal or business relationship, the form is not required. Question 35. Which of the following is not a power or duty of the British Columbia Financial Services Authority? A. Issuance of real estate services licenses. B. Conduct formal disciplinary processes. C. Require the licensees to pay part or all of the expenses incurred in relation to an investigation to which an order relates. D. Undertaking and carrying out real estate law reform. The correct answer is D. Undertaking and carrying out real estate law reform. Explanation. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, has the power to issue licenses, conduct disciplinary processes, and require licensees to pay certain investigation expenses. However, undertaking and carrying out real estate law reform is not within BCFSA's scope. This falls under the jurisdiction of government bodies or legislative authorities. Question 36. The Superintendent of Real Estate is appointed by A. Real estate licensees, B. The Lieutenant Governor and Council, C. The Real Estate Boards, D. The BC Financial Services Authority Board of Directors. The correct answer is B. The Lieutenant Governor and Council. Explanation. The Superintendent of Real Estate is appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and Council, which means the position is filled by a decision made by the executive branch of the provincial government. Question 37. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority is not responsible for which one of the following? A. Holding hearings to investigate the conduct of licensees. B. Determining the information required on a license application. C. Enforcing the provisions of the applicable professional code of ethics. D. Providing for an educational program for licensees. The correct answer is D. Providing for an educational program for licensees. Explanation. The British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, is responsible for regulating and overseeing the real estate profession, including conducting investigations and hearings, setting licensing requirements, and enforcing the professional code of ethics. However, educational programs for licensees are typically provided by external bodies, such as the Real Estate Council of British Columbia, or BC, not the BCFSA. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 38. Where a seller sells a unit of subdivided land in British Columbia and the subdivision is a development property. A. The Real Estate Development Marketing Act has no jurisdiction. B. The unit of subdivided land is called a subdivision unit. C. The buyer has the right to rescind the purchase agreement at any time by providing appropriate notice if the seller has not provided a disclosure statement to the buyer. D. None of the above are correct. The correct answer is C. The buyer has the right to rescind the purchase agreement at any time by providing appropriate notice if the seller has not provided a disclosure statement to the buyer. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, REDMA, developers are required to provide a disclosure statement to buyers when selling a subdivided land unit. If this disclosure statement is not provided, the buyer has the right to rescind the purchase agreement by giving notice, ensuring they are protected in such transactions. Question 39. The Realtor Code of Ethics is enforced by the A. Canadian Real Estate Association, B. Local Real Estate Boards, C. British Columbia Real Estate Association, D. British Columbia Financial Services Authority. The correct answer is B. Local Real Estate Boards. Explanation. The Realtor Code of Ethics is enforced by local real estate boards, which are responsible for ensuring that their members, who are realtors, adhere to the ethical standards outlined in the code. Local boards have mechanisms in place to handle complaints and disciplinary actions related to breaches of the code. Question 40. Which of the following is a primary responsibility of a real estate licensee under the Real Estate Services Act? A. To negotiate commissions directly with the buyer and seller. B. To act in the best interests of their client, following the instructions provided. C. To make decisions on behalf of the client without consulting them. D. To ensure that all real estate transactions are completed within 1 month of an offer being made. The correct answer is B. To act in the best interests of their client, following the instructions provided. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a licensee is required to act in the best interests of their client, ensuring that they follow the client's instructions while providing professional guidance. This duty is foundational to maintaining trust and legal compliance in real estate transactions. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 41. Which of the following is the primary duty of a licensee when representing a client in a real estate transaction? A. To ensure the property is sold for the highest possible price. B. To disclose all personal opinions about the property. C. To act with honesty, integrity, and in the best interests of the client. D. To negotiate the most favorable terms for themselves. Correct answer. C. To act with honesty, integrity, and in the best interests of the client. Explanation. The primary duty of a real estate licensee is to act in the best interests of their client, which includes being honest, maintaining integrity, and upholding fiduciary duties. The licensee must prioritize the client's needs and interests above their own. Question 42. Under the Real Estate Services Act, which of the following is a key responsibility of a managing broker? A. To act as a personal real estate representative for clients. B. To ensure that all real estate transactions within the brokerage comply with the law. C. To independently negotiate deals for clients without any brokerage involvement. D. To set the commission rate for all licensees within the brokerage. Correct answer B. To ensure that all real estate transactions within the brokerage comply with the law. Explanation. A managing broker is responsible for supervising the activities of all licensees within the brokerage to ensure that they comply with the Real Estate Services Act and other legal requirements. The managing broker does not act as a personal representative for clients, but oversees the operations and ensures regulatory compliance. Question 43. Which of the following actions is a real estate licensee required to take under the Real Estate Services Act when they plan to buy a property for themselves or a company they are involved with? A. Disclose their intent to the buyer in writing before making the purchase. B. Disclose their intent to the seller in writing before making the purchase. C. Obtain approval from the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, before proceeding with the purchase. D. Submit a formal application to the local real estate board before purchasing. Correct answer B. Disclose their intent to the seller in writing before making the purchase. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a licensee must disclose in writing to the seller that they are a licensee and are purchasing the property either for themselves or for a related entity, such as a corporation or partnership. This disclosure must be made prior to entering into any agreement for the purchase. Question 44. Which of the following is not a duty of the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA? A. Issuing real estate licenses. B. Investigating complaints about licensees. Creating educational programs for real estate professionals. D. Enforcing the Realtor Code of Ethics. Correct answer. D. Enforcing the Realtor Code of Ethics. Explanation. The BCFSA is responsible for licensing, regulating, and investigating complaints related to licensees under the Real Estate Services Act. However, enforcement of the Realtor Code of Ethics is the responsibility of local real estate boards, not the BCFSA. Question 45. Which of the following must a licensee disclose in writing to the seller prior to entering into a contract when the licensee intends to buy real property for themselves or for a company they are involved with? A. The amount of commission the licensee expects to earn from the sale. B. That they are a licensee acquiring the real estate for themselves or for the company or partnership. C. The name of the seller's agent. D. The address of the property. Correct answer. B. That they are a licensee acquiring the real estate for themselves or for the company or partnership. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a licensee must disclose in writing to the seller if they intend to purchase real property for themselves or for a company or partnership in which they have an interest. This ensures transparency and avoids any conflict of interest. Question 46. Which of the following is a responsibility of the managing broker of a real estate brokerage under the Real Estate Services Act? A. To represent clients in the sale or purchase of real estate. B. To supervise the activities of all licensees within the brokerage. C. To be personally responsible for the commission fees earned by the brokerage. D. To approve the marketing materials for the brokerage. Correct answer B. To supervise the activities of all licensees within the brokerage. Explanation. The managing broker is responsible for overseeing and ensuring that all licensees within the brokerage comply with the laws and regulations set out under the Real Estate Services Act. This includes ensuring ethical conduct, supervision of transactions, and compliance with the real estate services rules. Question 47. Which of the following is true regarding the Real Estate Services Act? A. It only applies to individuals licensed to sell residential properties. B. It requires all licensees to complete continuing education every 3 years. C. It establishes rules for advertising by real estate licensees. D. It exempts property managers from following ethical guidelines. Correct answer C. It establishes rules for advertising by real estate licensees. Explanation. The Real Estate Services Act sets guidelines for various aspects of real estate transactions, including advertising. It requires that all advertising by real estate licensees be truthful and not misleading, ensuring that clients and consumers are protected. The Act covers more than just residential property sales and applies to various aspects of real estate services, including property management. Question 48. Which of the following is a requirement for a real estate licensee to maintain their license under the Real Estate Services Act? A. The licensee must renew their license every 10 years. B. The licensee must complete a minimum of 18 hours of continuing education every 2 years. C. The licensee must submit an annual financial statement to the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA. D. The licensee must have a personal real estate corporation. Correct answer, B. The licensee must complete a minimum of 18 hours of continuing education every 2 years. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, licensees are required to complete a minimum of 18 hours of continuing education every 2 years to maintain their license. This ensures that they stay updated on relevant laws, practices, and industry changes. Other options do not reflect the specific requirements for maintaining a real estate license. Chapter 2, BC Real Estate Exam Prep Question 49. Which of the following is true regarding the disclosure of interest in trade under the Real Estate Services Act? A. A licensee must disclose any personal interest in a transaction before the offer to purchase is made. B. A licensee is required to disclose their interest in trade only if they are representing a buyer. Disclosure is not required if the licensee has a passive interest, such as holding a 5% share in a corporation involved in the transaction. D. A licensee does not need to disclose an interest in trade if the transaction is between family members. Correct answer A. A licensee must disclose any personal interest in a transaction before the offer to purchase is made. Explanation. Under the Real Estate Services Act, a licensee must disclose any personal interest they have in a transaction, such as owning an interest in the property, before the offer to purchase is made. This ensures transparency and protects clients from potential conflicts of interest. The disclosure must be made regardless of whether the licensee is acting on behalf of the buyer or seller, and even if they hold a small or passive interest in the transaction. Question 50. Which of the following is not required for a licensee to obtain and maintain a trading services license in British Columbia? A. Completion of a recognized real estate course. B. Successful completion of a criminal record check. C. Payment of a licensing fee. D. Submission of a business plan to the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA. Correct answer. D. Submission of a business plan to the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA. Explanation. To obtain and maintain a trading services license, a licensee must complete a recognized real estate course, undergo a criminal record check, and pay the necessary licensing fee. However, submitting a business plan to the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA, is not a requirement for obtaining or maintaining a trading services license. Thanks for watching. I hope these practice questions helped you feel more confident as you prepare for your UBC real estate exam. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more study tips, practice questions, and everything you need to pass your exam. If you have any questions or need further clarification on any topic, drop a comment below. I'd love to help. Keep studying and I'll see you in the next video. Good luck with your exam.